I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
President Daley.
Here.
Vice President Henderson.
Here.
Trustee Parr.
Here.
And Trustees Clements and Schwartz are absent.
Okay, well, thanks for coming. We called a special meeting tonight to discuss the potential of reorganizing.
WD-40, anybody? I've gone down the truck and get some.
You can't come in gracefully here. We've called this meeting to discuss the potential of reorganizing our administration. We, as a board, have been discussing it for a week or so now, just trying to hear it and understand it and see what the pluses and minuses are of it. And we thought that it was really important to bring it to the public as soon as possible and get some feedback, if there is feedback, from you guys. And then we can weave that into our decision-making process. So at today's meeting, we're not voting. This is not, we haven't already made any decisions. This is just an informational meeting to learn more about it for you guys. So I guess with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bauer.
I'm going to come around.
Go, get out of the way.
Don't we move down?
So I want to recognize so many of our faculty and staff are here on your summer vacation. That's really nice. You look well rested, and I hope you're having a nice summer. This is kind of a number of different conversations that were separate conversations that ended up coming together, and I'm going to have to talk about different parts so you can see the thought processes that brought us to where information was shared with the board came into the discussion, and now we're bringing the community into the discussion. The real conversation began when Jen Wilson shared that she may be leaving the district, or that she was potentially going to be leaving the district. And when that occurred, we started looking at what we would need to do in order to replace her, some of the other things that were happening simultaneously, and we asked the question, with the strategic plan just being approved by the board and the district moving into some new types of thinking for 21st century learning, with this opportunity, and we're going to miss Jen terribly, but it also can be seen as an opportunity to look at what we presently do and decide if there's any need to make any changes. And we were talking a lot about, what we're looking at doing is we're really redeveloping parts of education, and we're making sure that we provide things for our students that haven't been on our radar before. And the question was, will the old type of administrative makeup be what is in the best interest of us moving into the strategic plan and the 21st century skills? We have a lot of different things happening. We have teachers that are moving into new teaching positions that will help support what we're thinking of doing. We have administrators that have certain areas of expertise that we may be able to utilize in a slightly different way. And all of this together began the discussion of whether or not the administrative team could be the responsibility shifted to use the administrators to the best of our ability. So we started talking about what the skill set of our administrators were or are, and what the types of skills that we're going to need in order to move the initiative forward. We also looked at the positions that were new to the district, with Simon and Leah moving into new positions, which are teaching positions. Those are not administrative positions. But we were looking at all of that, and we were looking at what needed to occur for next year. So all of these things were all part of this conversation. The other thing, and I'm going to be very frank with you, the other thing we looked at is how can we retain and how can we keep happily the administrators we presently have in the district. And as you know, the administrators that we have are super. They're wonderful. They do things very well, and they help to move this district forward. And we needed to look at the fact that they were all very experienced in their role. They all had areas of interest that were beyond their initial roles. And should we as a district try to fulfill any interests that they had so we could retain them and instead of having them have to go elsewhere for employment. So all of that came together. And I can tell you that there are districts right now that are out there, and this is happening all over because there's a shortage of great administrators. And if there are good administrators, they're going to be called upon. And we know that, and we also want to make sure that we retain the great people we have, including teachers. And when we have very talented teachers, they could be called upon, and we would try to do the same. So what we looked at, we were looking at the 3 positions to the left, and these are probably the biggest changes that came through the budget, the bottom 2, the technology education position, and the technology infrastructure consultant. Those are 2 components that were discussed and decided upon in the budget. And what we were doing in order to be able to hire the Discover, Create, and Innovate teacher and the technology integration innovation specialist, we had to look at what we presently had in the budget, and we had to figure out how we could repurpose some of the funding that we had there to actually create some of the positions that are directly linked to our strategic plan. And if you've had the opportunity to either be part of the strategic plan or read about what the recommendations were in the strategic plan, you will see that the right side of the recommendations really echo everything that we have in the strategic plan. So we started out talking about the technology integration position and the technology infrastructure consultant, and then when Jen made the decision to move to BOCES for an exciting new program which they had, and this is a new position that BOCES has never had before, we put the 3rd part of the puzzle on the left side. And with the discussion of those 3 things, along with other things like we're pulling back from certain things from BOCES that we were paying BOCES that will now be on our own budget. We're going to be using funds that we use for newsletters that will actually come under the Discover, Create, Innovate teachers. We're going to be redeveloping our website, which will come under the Technology Integration Innovation Specialist. We're looking at all different components under that. We have 2 of the teachers, Simon and Leah, are going to Chicago next week with me for a planning week as we start moving into the new tech network and see where that's going to take us. So this is all happening simultaneously. So we were trying to figure out where all of this information and where all these responsibilities would lie. And we have talked about creating a new position, not an additional position, a new position. Everything we're proposing tonight is the exact same number of administrators. We are just modifying what we would consider under the title. So we are proposing a new position, not a new position, the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching, Learning, Innovation, and Student Services. And that position would take many of the things that were under the umbrella of the Director of Special Remedial Assessment Services and Chief Information Officer and would shift it there. So the Chief Information Officer would be there, the Student Services, the Special Education piece would be there, and all of the other components, including our creating the new strategic plan and helping to create the action plan that's going to allow it to happen, which we're going to be working on when our teachers come back in September. And all of that is the new position. So it's going to be many of the components of Jen's job and then some additional components. The person we're recommending to take that is Brian Ulm. And as you know, Brian is extremely talented, has been in his position for many years, is ready for the new challenges that await him, and we feel he would do an excellent job in that. We're also saying why an assistant superintendent, because that's where his talents lie right now. And we feel that all of the components of what he does would match that job beautifully. He has experience as both an assistant principal and a principal. He's been in the district for many years, and he understands all of the components of special education. We would be linking RTI and special ed more closely in this position. And he would be an integral part of having our staff development efforts continued, as well as bringing the strategic plan into light. So that is the first recommendation. With recommending Brian into that position, we were in conversation with Julia Sniffen, who is also ready for a principalship, to move into the high school position in an interim high school position. And she would be taking over the responsibilities for the high school principal. It would be an interim position, so she can decide if that's her best match, and she's ours. So let me just, what's here? I think everybody knows the talents that, yep. We have copies of what's here, if anybody wants one. So we know how talented Julia is. We know how long she's been in the district. We know she's ready for a principalship. We also know that she knows all the kids in the high school because she's been with them for all the years that they were in the elementary and the middle level, and now they're just longer. And so she would be working with them, knowing their families, knowing who they are, knowing their needs, knowing what supports they need. So that was the second recommendation. Knowing that this is already a lot of change, and we have to limit the amount of change so it's comfortable for people, and we don't want to be overzealous in the recommendations. We talked about, the elementary middle school principal is going to be Brent. And so that remains. The only thing that we have, whoops, we lost that there. Thanks, Gary. The only thing that we have talked about is the overwhelming amount of stuff that happens when you are responsible for 9 grades. And the K-8 structure has been with us for a while, but it's a lot for 2 people to be involved in 2 of everything. 2 faculties, 2 faculty meetings, 2 arrivals, 2 departures, 2 different needs for 2 different groups. And we think it's time to bring back more of a focus for one principal and or another, and we're calling it kind of a house principal. So when we would hire somebody for the elementary middle school, we would hire somebody whose focus would be primarily middle school. Although Brent would still have the overview and the supervision component for that. And so those are the challenges that we have. Those are the recommendations we have. We're using this as really kind of thinking out of the box to help us move into our strategic plan. I have a little blue box there, and I just want to point it out because I want everyone to understand that this is being done in a cost-neutral way, and the number of administrators, it's going to be the same. The same number we had last year, we will have coming in to this year with this plan. What we were able to do is kind of redevelop the salary schedules based on the fact that we're going to be hiring a new assistant principal as opposed to one that's been here for 13 years. And so all of that takes into consideration the shifting of funds, but it is a cost-neutral component. Right now, a 0% increase would occur if we hired the house principal, the middle school house or assistant principal, whatever you want to call it, for $95,000. We may have difficulty finding somebody that's willing to leave a teaching position to come in as an administrator for that. So we do have an additional $10,000 that was budgeted, that wasn't put into the salary when Leah took over the position of the technology integration specialist, and we hired a new person for $10,000 less than she was making. So we have an additional $10,000 that would allow the salary to range somewhere between $95,000 and $105,000 for the new assistant principal or house principal. And so those basically are the recommendations. We've had the opportunity to present it to the board. We showed the financials. We can't show the financials of the new positions until they're approved, and if that's the direction we go, because we're still we'd be negotiating those salaries. But when all is said and done, it is very important for us, and it's very important for you to know that we're trying to figure out a way to do this in a cost-neutral way. Again, no new administrators, the same number of administrators, it's just a shifting of the responsibilities and the titles. So, questions from the audience, questions from the board? Be happy to take any.
Diana, can you just talk a little bit more about the dynamic between the K through 8 principal and the house principal or assistant principal? Can you talk a little bit about those two different names, just so everybody nobody's confused by it?
Yep.
So I'm hearing assistant principal, house principal, and middle school coordinator. So if you could just kind of define what those three different things are and what we're actually looking for.
They would basically be the same thing. You could call the same position any of those names. But one of the things we definitely want to make very clear is there's a focus of the responsibilities being a middle school focus. The difference between a coordinator and a principal would be the certification area. And for those people who have heard the term APPR and some of the changes and evaluations and observations, we need a certified administrator in order to be able to do the number of observations throughout the district that we're going to be required to do. And there are new mandates that are coming in. We're reopening the discussions for APPR because they're required for next year. And so we're actually going to be talking to the faculty over the summer in a kind of a negotiations type of way to figure out what our APPR is going to be for next year. So all of this, even though a coordinator could be someone who just focuses on the middle school, we need it to be either a principal, house principal designation or an assistant principal designation, because they would be required to do observations. And they would be required to be certified to do observations.
So the person needs an administrative degree.
Yes. And a house principal is still under the auspices of the principal, but they have a very refined focus and they deal with a very refined group of students. And so about 175 middle school students would be associated with the house principal.
And so that's a little bit of a switch, because currently Brent's the K through 8 principal and Julia is the K through 8 assistant principal.
Correct.
And so they're both focusing on all grades.
Right.
So this is a little bit of a shift in terms of focus. So Brent will still be umbrellaing everybody K through 8, but this person that we're bringing in will really be focused on the middle school.
Right.
Is there anything that will be missing for the elementary school in that configuration?
I would say anything that would be missing for the assistant principal in the elementary school, Brent would take over as the principal.
Uh-huh.
So the answer is, would it change? Yes. Would there be a shift of responsibilities? Yes. Should there be anything that's missing? No.
Okay.
Carol?
About discipline, can the house principal, suspensions, et cetera, the house principal would be able to suspend students as needed?
Yep, and it's as long as they were administratively certified. And if you read the regulations, they will say that the principal will suspend or their designee. As long as their designee has certification, they can suspend. And they can, as a principal or an assistant principal, can suspend for a maximum of 5 days. So other thoughts, any other questions? You know, I hope that you're seeing that this was, oh, I'm sorry. I hope that you're seeing that this was a very kind of methodical, a long conversation with many different people that brought us to the point that we would even recommend it to the board. And the fact that there are so many different things that are going to be converging on the district in September. We want to make sure that we hit the ground running and we have the right people in place, and we think that the things that we presently have for our, although it works very well, our present administrative structure, there are some talents that we could then enhance with new responsibilities. So I'm sorry. Okay. Mike?
Thanks. Just a couple of questions. First off, thanks for the presentation.
Sure.
Were these positions interviewed for, or is this for with Brian and with Julia, or they were just appointed, or how was Brent fit into the picture? Was it offered to all three, or was it just through discussion?
All the administrators were part of the conversation. The one that will go, that is not an interim position, would be the assistant superintendent's position. The rest are interim positions. Actually, the assistant principal or the house principal would be a leave replacement, and it would be a leave replacement for Julia. So if she didn't love the position and it just wasn't what we all thought would be the best match, she would still be able to return to her position. So although it's not now, and part of it is the timing too, it's very difficult to really go out and get quality candidates for administrative positions in July.
Okay.
And so that's why they have the interim label, because it's something that right now we can place people in it, but there will be a search and there will be interviews at that point. It's just not going to happen immediately.
Okay, so Brent was offered the position as well?
Well, I don't know. It was the way that we looked at the entire thing. I'm not saying who was offered or who wasn't. I'm saying at this point, the way that the whole structure works, Brent is very comfortable with the position, so I can tell you that. And right now, he's excited. He's at Harvard University at a principal's center, and he's doing his planning for next year. So there was nothing negative. We love Brent. He's wonderful, and we want him to stay here for a long time. And when he feels that he's ready for the next position, I hope he will tell us, and we will see if there's something we can provide for him at that point. But at this point, he was part of all the discussions. He was part of everything that was introduced.
Okay, right now it's zero, obviously, zero growth. They have to renegotiate, obviously, because their position titles are changing. Anytime you tie in superintendent to any position, chances are that person's going to want more money.
Yeah, I mean, that there would be an increase in salary,
Yeah,
yes.
So to go out and actually say right now that it is going to be a zero, but once this gets approved, that the board approves it, further meetings, it's going to go up.
Yeah,
That's safe to say.
And if he were a principal, it would go up as
Yeah.
well. So,
And Brent's very possible, not to cut you off, I'm sorry. Brent's very possible can go up because he's actually taking on more role, because the other person's going to be focused just on middle school. He's only taking up 175, where Julia and Brent were working together as a team. So,
I think, though, the conversation with Brent and Julia started long before this discussion started. And they both, although they love to be involved in everything, it was a lot, and they were constantly spread amongst too many grades. And so we were saying, what would be the best solution for this? So that conversation already started.
Okay.
And that was also part of it. But the other piece is, if we were hiring outside in the community of the learning community throughout the Putnam North and Westchester or Rockland, and we started bringing in candidates, we would be, as we always are, on the low side of salaries, because we're a small school. And although I can argue that the responsibilities are still the same, the salaries would have to be similar to salaries in the region, but I can tell you, looking at the comparative analysis, even a salary for an assistant superintendent would be at the low end.
So if I could just jump in, Michael, just to clarify.
Please.
The note at the bottom right-hand corner, that these changes are cost neutral, takes into account the fact that people who are taking on additional levels of seniority and responsibility will be
Compensated.
receiving increases.
Mhm.
That's been factored into this cost-neutral statement because there are savings elsewhere in this reorganization that make that possible.
Right, thank you.
So even through negotiations, you're saying that it's going to stay 3 years, a contract runs out in 16 or 17, whatever it is for administrators, right?
No, we'll be
You-
starting again soon.
Okay, so you're saying through that time frame, there's going to be no cost increase
Actually,
whatsoever?
the HAA contract is up for renegotiation this year.
Okay.
And there would,
But what they're saying is that when it becomes, so Brian's salary is whatever it is right now. When he becomes, if we were to approve this and he were to become assistant superintendent, his salary would be increased,
Mhm.
for sure, because he's having more responsibility. But what we're saying is that even with that increase, that's still getting factored into this cost neutral idea. Like, he's gonna be increased, but we can bring the assistant principal in at less, and there's kind of like reconfiguration, so the
But they're all
amount of
gonna-
money that will be for the administrative line, we're expecting to be neutral.
Yeah, but they're all going to rise, though. I mean, no matter how you, I mean, yes, they're cost neutral at that still
Yes.
point in time.
Yes.
But they are going to rise, no matter how you look at it, as we all
Yeah,
know.
every contract,
Yes.
we're expecting,
But
yeah.
at any time, and I said, and when you tie into
Absolutely.
it, because when we added the middle school position
Yeah.
as an assistant, I mean, as a coordinator, which I do agree, there's no bark, there's no bite, there's nothing, there's no sense of bringing it as a coordinator. When Julia first got that as a middle school coordinator, all right, there was a lot of pushback from the community on that because of you're adding an administrator to that position. And then when it became an assistant principal, even though there was no change, there's still a cost involved. But the community, now, speaking of community, I don't want to get off track here, but I did. Community, if the community pushed back enough that they wanted to switch between Brent and Julia, is that something the board is open to? Or is
I
that-
don't think we couldn't even comment on that.
Okay, all right. That's all I have for now, thank you.
Thank you. So,
Is there other questions about that while we're kind of on that topic about like the cost factor? Anybody?
any questions from the board at this point, or should I come around?
Can I just, something that Michael was saying?
Please.
So, I think
Just make sure you're talking.
I think Michael's question was, yes, it's cost neutral right now, but when we go to renegotiate, if their salaries are up now and you increase them by 3% later, have we factored that in long-term?
Well, the bottom line.
Was that more the question, Michael?
But the bottom line right now,
Is
the
right now
document-
it's neutral.
Right now, and so if it was 3% of what we presently have, or 3% of the new, because it's exactly the same, it would be the same amount.
Right, but looking forward in 2015-16, we're now looking at 3% of a bigger number. I think that's where
No, we're
Michael was
not.
trying to go.
We're looking at
The same
3%
number.
of the same number.
It's cost neutral if you don't exceed 95,000 plus 10,000 for assistant principal.
Correct. Well, actually, no, let me clarify, because I want to be totally transparent. It's cost-effective with administrators if we hire at 95,000. If we bring the extra 10,000 in, because that's on the teacher's line, then it would be neutral budget-wise, but then we would have added $10,000.
So to be cost neutral in this plan, you have to hire a principal at 95.
An assistant principal or a house principal, yes.
Carol has a question.
House principal a real title in the education field? Because I'm getting this feeling like when we put a middle school coordinator in, it was a meaningless title. And I just wouldn't want, if it's not a real title with some grit to it, I'm afraid of it.
It's not a certification area. Assistant principal is the certification area.
Right.
But if you look at any large high school, and one of the things that started probably 10 to 15 years ago is they realized that if you had, or middle school clusters, you may have 1,000 people in the school, but if they divide them into 3 houses, so it's smaller groups going through together. That's where the house principal came from.
Really, it has a meaning in the education field.
Yes, it does.
Outside of Haldane.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I'd never heard it either. I asked for explanation. Yes.
And if people feel more comfortable with assistant principal, that's fine too. So,
I
it's,
feel for the person who's taking the job. You want them
Right,
have a meaningful job in the
Right.
education field.
yeah. And I think the only thing that, it doesn't matter what the type of principal it is, I think the meaningful piece is that they would be focused primarily on the middle school.
So just as a middle school person, so who would I report, like, do I report to Brent's for things, or do I report to that house principal first? You know what I'm saying? Like,
You would go to the house principal first, unless there was something that you just wanted to work with Brent on, so that's,
basically our direct supervisor.
Would
that we
be-
should go to for everyday, daily routine
Right.
things and whatever would be this house principal.
right. And so, and that may make it more clear as well, because, it's like, who do you go to
Well,
if
yeah.
you're, K-8, so, and have 9 grades.
Does Brian go to, if he's approved for that position, a separate contract, correct? I mean, he's not going to be with the HAA no more.
Correct,
So he's going to go over to the other side.
correct. To the other side.
It's to the dark side of the contract.
The really dark side.
Something else that we talked about as a board was this idea of, should we just, should we go through the hiring process to hire a high school principal right now? Or should we create an interim situation? And we as a group were more comfortable with the interim situation because we felt like, we've just gone through this whole process as a community for the strategic plan. And as a community, we've all, kind of grasped what our school is and what we want it to be. So to dictate who is just going to be the new principal seemed kind of disingenuous. We wanted to figure out a way to get the community involved in who the high school principal is going to be. So although Julia is potentially going to be the interim, and we expect that she'll do a fantastic job, her being the high school principal long-term is it's not a done deal. We are expecting to go through a interview process, an application process. Other people can throw their hat in the ring. It will be a real hiring of a high school principal, and maybe she's the right fit for that job, or maybe she's not. But I don't know. Just saying that, I don't know that that's been said yet. So that's just something else in the mix.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point that Jen just raised. And one of the reasons we're in that situation is because we are on a very short timeline here. Jen Wilson's resignation came as a surprise. And so we're looking at this, trying to make the best that we can in a short amount of time, so that we're ready to start the new school year with everybody in their positions and ready to go at the beginning of September. I imagine that a lot of people who are hearing this for the first time are feeling exactly the same way that I did when hearing it for the first time, which is it's a lot to take in. It's quite a shock, because I love Haldane just the way it is. I love Brian in the high school, I love Julia in the elementary school, and I love Brent down there as well. They're all great people, they do fantastic jobs. I think we'd be very happy for people just to keep doing the same thing. But that's not the real world. We have to deal with change. We have to accept the fact that we have some extremely talented individuals who not only do a great job at what they're doing currently, but they have ambitions too. They want to grow, and we as a board feel it's very important that we give them an opportunity to do that. So once I got over the initial shock of perhaps not seeing the same people in the same place again, I now see the great potential that this reorganization offers for the district. I think it's allowing us to make some transitions that had been recommended through the strategic plan, and it puts an administrative structure in place to support that. I think we're taking advantage of talents that people have that don't necessarily have an opportunity to advantage the district currently. So I'm now very excited about the positive spin of what this can potentially do for us.
Go ahead.
So in one year, then, you'd be opposed to whatever for high school principal?
Probably January-ish, February-ish, when the normal hiring season, you want, and then the people that are looking for new positions are kind of out and about. Most of the people,
House principal too,
right,
would be the same.
yep.
Right, because the house assistant principal, whatever that position is called, will be a leave replacement for Julia, right? Because she might not like being at the high school and might want that job back. Or she might not get the high school principalship job, and she should have something waiting for her. So she is leaving her position to take on the high school principal role as a way to keep things moving along. So we're ready to go in September, right? So what happens next with her is unknown. So that's a leave replacement. So we would have to do a whole hiring process
Right.
for the assistant principal role as well.
So is it a leave replacement for the current position that she has as assistant principal?
That's
As
my-
opposed to
Yes.
then going, if it didn't work out, then she's not going to go back as the house principal? She's going to go back again as
She's-
the assistant elementary middle school?
Correct, that's my understanding. She wouldn't be demoted, she would,
Well, that's what
Right,
I'm
she-
kind of
No,
wondering.
but it would be an assistant principalship.
assistant principalship.
And it's really your certification area, so, and what she was, we'd have to look at the wording in the board minutes, and so she would have a job. I guess that's,
Right, yeah, she would have a job, but is it going, would it be the same job that she currently has, or would it be the new type?
I think we would have to talk about that. I don't think, if we saw that there was a lot of positive momentum having more specialized people, we would have that conversation. But she would be moving back into an assistant principalship.
And whether or not that she would be the point person for the middle school or not, or go back to what she currently does, would be up in the air.
That would be under discussion.
See how the cards play out.
Right, right. Yes, Mike?
Kim brings up an excellent point. Now, right now, the contract is we're paying for the HJA. So, everything settles as its way you propose it tonight. Now it's going to be, you're saying it's going to be a slight increases. If Julia or whoever, not to leave names out of it, person X goes back after that position, say they had a salary bump, does that salary bump go back down too, or is it going to stay up? Now, you're in a whole other sticky situation that you're going into an assistant position for a principal. You went to
Right.
140,000, where you made 120 before, and now you're going down back to your assistant position. You're going to keep your 140, or you're going to go to 120?
No, the salary stays with the position.
What does that mean?
We wouldn't pay an assistant principal what we would pay a high school principal.
So she went
So
back
if Julia
down.
came in as the high school interim principal, she'd get a bump up in her salary. If at the end of the day, she decided everybody decided to bring her back into the assistant principal role, she'd go back to the assistant principal salary.
And I think in any interim position, people who are moving into, if it's a lateral move, they wouldn't expect an increase in salary, but if they're going to a different position that is normally more lucrative, they would expect that, and then if they go back into the position that they had, it would be within that ballpark of what they used to make. But that happens anytime somebody goes into an interim position.
Keep the middle school house principal model, her duties would be less. If she goes back, if we kept that model.
But-
Now she services elementary,
Yeah.
middle school.
And I don't think we're at the point we can even
Right, okay.
make that,
What I'm saying is the position is worth less than less.
She's I think she's very aware of the potential risk that she's taking. But, we know as a team that also throwing up kicking up the dust for what's happening in K through 8 while we're throwing this out there, it's just too much. So we're expecting those answers to come
right.
as we go.
Yep. But I also have to say that the administrators are really excited about the potential. They're saying, we're going to do whatever works best for this district. We think this is a great idea. It's going to allow the whole strategic plan to come in. We're invested in that. We know we now have somebody in every place in the district that has been part of the planning process, and we're ready to launch. And so, yes, I think, are there negative consequences? But I don't think that's the way that anybody's looking at it. They're looking at it, oh, this is a new experience, and this is something we can all go into in a very positive way.
Yeah, and not to speak for the administrators, but as a board, as a group, we've discussed all this and all the possibilities, but we've also had the opportunity to meet face-to-face individually with Brian, with Julia, with Brent,
Right.
and have gotten to ask them kind of the hard questions, just to say, what do you think about this? Is this really the right direction? Is this what you want to do professionally? Is this what you think is best for the school? And hands down, they all are excited about it. They think it's the right move. They think it's the right move specifically for the strategic plan. For them personally, I think there's a lot that's right about it too. But they really, I was impressed by how compelling this reorganization seemed to further our K through 12 model, and to further strategic plan. So they're excited about it.
So other thoughts, questions?
So what happens now, Diana, maybe you can just speak a little bit to how people can give feedback, questions that may come up after you leave here, people who are watching at home and they have questions, like how can we hear from them?
So tomorrow, I will place a letter on the website, and we're going to blast it to the community and to the faculty and staff that kind of outlines what we just discussed here, and talk about the fact that this is a recommendation that I am making to the board for the administrators, and the board or I will take, and whomever you choose to contact, will take any of your thoughts between now and next Tuesday. And if there are any specific questions that you have that weren't answered either tonight or by the letter, I'll make sure that information keeps flowing. And then next Tuesday, the board will vote on the recommendations with also an understanding of what the community has said through the last week. So they will take into consideration all of that. This is not the time to vote on it. They're giving a week of response time. I'm letting you know, though, that I will be in Chicago with Simon and Leah next week in the planning session, and so I will be here for questions, but I will be virtual. So you'll see a little Diana here next week. And so, and that's the timeline at this point. And then based on everything that the board has heard and that we have heard, we're going to keep the lines of communication going. And if this is approved next week, which very honestly I hope it is, I think that we'll be moving into then another letter where we're going to start launching and saying, now this is where we're going and what we're doing, and we'll talk a little bit about the retreats that are coming up and some of the other things that we're going to be doing, and the planning will begin in earnest. So did I share?
Yeah, and we know that we feel the timeline is hasty, or quick. We feel that too.
Yeah.
It's just that there's no real alternative, to get ready for the fall. We kind of need to move at this pace, so we appreciate your understanding that, and
Right.
hope you're ready for that ride as we are.
I just have a quick question. The second, where it says, you said that the second box and the third box are definitely teaching positions, correct? I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
Yes, teacher, yep.
I understand how the second box is definitely a teaching position. Can you maybe explain a little more how that third box fits into an actual teaching position, just to clarify for my own?
At this point, as we move into it, this is going to be more of an organizational teaching position, but it's within the teacher's contract. I imagine that we're going to see these positions change. I would imagine, that especially with Leah's position, somewhat dramatically. But right now, we have a lot of things that we're going to be needing somebody to be in the coordination role. And so that's where it is right now. And once we have set our course of action and the boat is floating, then there's more flexibility.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Okay, I think that, we can all digest. We really do welcome feedback. That's something that's really important to us as a board. So please share with us your thoughts if you have some to share. And I guess we'll pick this up next week if we don't hear from anyone beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we thank you all for coming.
The actual vote is going to be next week?
Yeah. Okay. Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Good thing you did that. We would have been here for a very long time. If anybody would like more of this schematic, the flow chart, they're here, so please help yourself.